When Bubba Wallace hit the wall and immediately drove into the right rear of Kyle Larson's car at Las Vegas, if you listened closely, you could hear a collective groan coming from the NASCAR tower. That's because officials of the sanctioning body knew they were about to have a major controversy on their hands with a situation that was the exact type of judgment call that they have routinely botched multiple times this year. And Wallace hadn't even exited his vehicle at that point. A brief recap: Kyle Larson dive-bombed going into turn 3 at Las Vegas, making it 3 wide with Kevin Harvick and Wallace, who had been battling for 5th position. The 2014 Cup Series champ didn't like what he saw, lifted, and backed out. Larson drifted up the track and effectively escorted the number 45 car into the fence. On the rebound, Wallace chased Larson down the track, where he delivered a vicious hit on the right rear, which sent both cars back up the track, where the Hendrick Motorsports car collected playoff driver Christopher Bell. Moments after the wreck, Wallace exited his wounded vehicle and headed straight for the damaged HMS car. When he got there, he proceeded to shove the diminutive Larson multiple times before begrudgingly being escorted away by a medical safety worker. Fans actively debated on social media what sort of punishment the 2311 racing driver might receive. On Tuesday, NASCAR answered the question, announcing that Wallace would be suspended for a single race, missing this weekend's event at Homestead. The drinking words since Sunday should have been precedent. We'd all be drunk by now because it's been said over and over since the ugliness at Las Vegas. And there are plenty of precedents to choose from. Just depends on how far back you want to go. When considering past cases where drivers have been suspended for an on-track incident, it's a short list to choose from. The last time it happened was 7 years ago, in the memorable Joey Logano-Matt Kenseth conflict, which ended in the Joe Gibbs racing driver sitting out a couple of races. Before that, it was another JGR driver in 2011, when Kyle Busch was forced to sit out the Xfinity and Cup races in Texas after he deliberately wrecked Ron Hornaday Jr. under caution in the truck race. Unfortunately, you don't have to go back that far to find examples of drivers intentionally wrecking another car. This year has provided plenty of examples. During the Truck Series race this summer at Lucas Oil Indianapolis Raceway Park, Carson Hocevar intentionally hooked Colby Howard into the outside wall in retaliation. Howard was done for the night. In the following week's penalty report, Hocevar wasn't on it. A couple of weeks before Hocevar, Noah Gragson set the standard during the Xfinity race at Road America, when he didn't like how Sage Karam had raced him and hooked the Alpha Prime racing car, which was the first domino to fall in what turned out to be a scary 13-car pileup. Gregson was docked 30 points and fined $35,000. Going back to the first race of the season, which we talked about here on the channel, Kyle Larson was involved in a retaliatory incident in the first ever race with the next-gen car during the clash at the Coliseum, when he retaliated against Justin Haley and escorted the Kaulig racing car into the inside wall for a hard hit. Larson went unpunished. Fast forward to just last month at Texas. That's when Wallace's team co-owner Denny Hamlin was involved with another HMS driver, William Byron, who didn't like the way that Hamlin had raced him and proceeded to spin him out under caution. NASCAR and all of their technology incredibly missed the incident until it was too late to act, and then retroactively punished Byron with a 25-point deduction and $50,000 fine, which was later changed on appeal to no points deduction and a $100,000 fine. Notice a pattern developing? You can't. There isn't one. That's because NASCAR is consistent in one thing: being inconsistent. While consistency, or lack thereof, is the crux of the matter and why so many fans are justifiably questioning the credibility of the governing body, there's another equally alarming reason: distrust. NASCAR fans have a hard time trusting what top officials have to say, and with good reason. The latest example was provided by NASCAR COO Steve O'Donnell, who appeared on SiriusXM NASCAR radio within an hour of the Wallace announcement to explain the punishment. Many fans and industry insiders, including drivers, thought Wallace might go unpunished for the on-track incident or even shoving Larson, because those are moves with the boys have at it mindset NASCAR has promoted in years past, but instead thought he would get penalized for walking on a hot track, pushing away an official's hand, and refusing to ride in the ambulance back to the infield care center. During O'Donnell's interview, he made it clear that Wallace wasn't being penalized for any of those violations.
Our actions are really specific to what took place on the racetrack. And when we look at, how that incident occurred, in our minds, really a dangerous act. We thought that was intentional, and put other competitors at risk. And, as we look at the sport and where we are today and where we want to draw that line going forward, we thought that, definitely crossed the line, and that's what we focused on in terms of making this call.
The rest of the exchange between Dave Moody and O'Donnell was an interesting one, because if you pay attention, you can clearly hear the NASCAR exec does his best to avoid answering the questions.
When you say you thought it was intentional, how do you come to that determination? What have you looked at to make that call?
Well, we've got a lot of data available to us, and we looked at that data and kind of reviewed the incident from a bunch of different angles. And, in our view and our determination through conversations, that's where we netted out.
What did the data show that led you to the conclusion?
We believed that it was a heat of the moment action that took place. And, I think you saw through Bubba's statement, I believe it was yesterday, if you had to do that all over again, I think maybe it would be a different circumstance. I think we understand that, it's a dangerous sport, and drivers are out there. There's a lot of emotion. There's a lot on the line. Everybody's racing their guts out, which is awesome for the sport. It's never been better in terms of that. But in this case, we just felt it crossed the line, and we really had to react because it's an action that we don't want to see going forward. And I know fans and people like to compare, the what ifs or what happened in the past. And for us, this was a reaction based on, what took place Sunday and what we don't want to see going forward in races that take place from the competitors, and want to draw that line and be as clear as we can for our competitors of where we stand.
Did you hear that? When asked what the data showed, O'Donnell immediately said the heat of the moment action and referenced Wallace's statement. He provided no data. But then, moments later, Moody mentioned how Wallace had suggested his steering had broken as the reason why he drove into Larson's car, and asked O'Donnell if NASCAR had examined the number 45 car and if it showed any issues with the steering as the driver had claimed. The COO again failed to answer the question.
We did examine the car, and I think that, Dave, what I would do is just go back to the data that we have. We're confident in the decision we made and why we made it.
Data that O'Donnell flat out failed to produce. And that's just it. When the sanctioning body dodges questions and tries to talk circles around nothing, NASCAR fans take note. They know when they're being fed a line of BS. This is yet another time it's happened, and less than a month after the incident between Hamlin and Byron at Texas, when Vice President of Competition Scott Miller offered another weak explanation.
So I'll have to be honest with you, Bob. When we were in the tower, we were paying more attention to the actual cause of the caution up there and dispatching our equipment. The William Byron, Denny, Hamlin thing, we had no eyes on. We saw Denny go through the grass, and by the time we got to a replay that showed the incident well enough to do anything to it, we'd gone back to green.
Interestingly, about an hour before Miller's comments that night, Hamlin, who was obviously frustrated by NASCAR's inaction during the race, was asked about the precedent being set.
Are you worried about the precedent this sets?
Well, I mean, are you talking about, like I mentioned on the radio, I should just get a teammate to knock out somebody under caution in the Final Four if we ever make it. But, I mean, certainly it's a precedent, but I don't think that NASCAR goes by precedents. I think they kind of do it week to week and figure it out.
No truer words have been spoken. NASCAR doesn't care about precedents. They just do it week to week. They've proven it time and time again this year.